So let's look at water. Water is found in all three phases of matter. So it's found as water vapor, as liquid water, and as ice. And water at room temperature and at body temperature is liquid, and that's due to the hydrogen bonding, which is so important. And this makes water really important to all living things. Water has a lot of functions. It's a transporter, so think of your blood transporting nutrients to the different regions of your body. It's a lubricator. It allows organs to move without friction. It's a cushioner, so it takes in some of the pressure associated with body force, like movements, anything like jumping or shaking your head. The pressure that would be absorbed by the organs is going to be absorbed first by water. And it allows us to excrete waste products. So water has a lot of characteristics or properties that make it able to do all of its jobs. So solvency, it's able to dissolve molecules. Cohesion, it can stick to other water molecules. Adhesion, it can stick to other atoms or other surfaces. Chemical reactivity, it can interact with molecules and cause or it can itself be ionized, and it can cause other molecules to ionize, and it is thermally stable. So when I say it is able to dissolve molecules, it is considered the universal solvent to polar molecules. Like dissolves like, and water is able to dissolve all polar molecules or hydrophilic molecules. Hydrophobic substances can't dissolve in water. Again, I mentioned this before, but water can't dissolve fats, which is why when you get salt and vinegar dressing, you have to mix it up, shake it up really good before you pour it onto your foods, because the watery portion and the fat portion are going to separate. Hydrophobic substances are going to be like your fats, phospholipids, steroid molecules, and these can be dissolved by other fats. So water is adhesive, which means it can cling to other surfaces. This is important because our organs are really packed in tight. Think about your thoracic cavity. Think about the chest. You have two lungs that are really large. You have a heart. You have an esophagus. You have a ton, and I say a ton, that sounds bad, but you have a lot of blood vessels. You have the bronchi. You have the trachea. You have bones. I mean, you have just so many things going on in that small thoracic cavity. The lungs are constantly inflating and deflating, inflating and deflating. The heart is constantly beating, beating, beating. So these organs have special membranes, serous membranes that we talked about in chapter 1, that surround them. And inside of the serous membrane is serous fluid. And that serous fluid is what allows the organs to move without any friction. So even though the heart and the lungs are constantly moving, they're not causing damage or pain to the other. Water is cohesive, so it can stick to other molecules. What this means is water can attach to proteins and carbohydrates in the blood and pull them to body cells that need them. Can also attach to waste products, metabolic wastes, and pull them towards the kidneys so that we can filter the waste out and get rid of it. Water is chemically reactive. It can ionize on its own into hydrogen ions and hydroxide ions, but it can also ionize other molecules. It's involved in two processes that make up and break down the macromolecules of life. The processes are called hydrolysis. Oh my gosh, I said that weird. Hydrolysis or hydrolysis and dehydration synthesis. So here is hydrolysis. Sucrose is table sugar. So this is what you put on your cornflakes in the morning, okay? When sucrose and water mix, sucrose is broken down into glucose, which is your blood sugar, and fructose, which is fruit sugar. And so what happens is water, H2O, enters and a hydrogen ion binds to the oxygen here and a hydroxide ion binds over here, and you produce the two, what we call monomers. So monomers make up the dimers, okay? Dehydration synthesis is the opposite reaction. So here we have two monomers. It could be glucose and fructose. It could also be an amino acid here and another amino acid here. If we take out a water molecule, the H and the OH, we produce a dimer right there, and we produce water as a byproduct. So it's dehydration because we're taking water away, and it's synthesis because we're making something. Water is stable in temperatures. It's thermally stable. That's the best way to say it. It has a high heat capacity, which means it takes a lot of energy to raise water by 1 degree Celsius. Because of this, our body temperature doesn't fluctuate. We stay at about 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit and 37 degrees Celsius. If our body temperature increases above the 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit or 37 degrees Celsius, negative feedback, so this is a homeostatic mechanism, is going to occur, and you're going to have receptors take in that temperature change, send signals to the hypothalamus to cause our body to cool down. So what typically happens is the hypothalamus is going to get the response that our body temperature has increased. It sends signals to our sweat glands, and our sweat glands will release sweat. So our body, or water also has a high heat of vaporation, which means it takes a lot of heat energy to change water from a liquid to a gas. And so when we do sweat, the amount of energy that it takes to get rid of the heat, or the amount of, I should say that way. What happens is the heat energy on the surface of our skin is going to be removed as the perspiration, the sweat, evaporates. As it evaporates, it pulls the heat away from our body. And that's how we cool off. And that's how we maintain body temperature. Water can spontaneously dissociate to form ions. So ions, hydrogen ions, are considered very strong acids, and hydroxyl ions are considered very strong bases. So anytime you produce an acid, like a hydrogen ion, it's also known as a proton donor because you're giving more hydrogens to the system. Acids are proton donors, And depending on the amount of hydrogen ions they give, the stronger the acid is. Bases are considered proton acceptors. The stronger bases can pick up more hydrogen ions. Weaker bases can pick up less hydrogen ions. But bases always accept hydrogen ions. And so acids and bases can be labeled on a pH scale. So the pH is the amount or the measure of the amount of hydrogen ions in a solution. And the pH scale is starts at 0, which is the most acidic, to 14, which is the most alkaline or basic. Pure water is neutral, so distilled water that we use in a lot of our lab activities is neutral, has a neutral pH, a pH of 7. Anything above that pH of 7 is going to have a decrease in the amount of hydrogen ions in it. Anything below that 7 is going to have an increase in the amount of hydrogen ions in it. Neutralization then occurs when you have an acid and a base that come together forming a neutral environment. So think about your stomach acid. And how many of you have ever had acid reflux? You have heartburn, and you take something like Tums to alleviate the heartburn. The stomach acid is acidic, very acidic. So look at that, gastric juice, pH of about 1. Think of that moving up into your esophagus. Your esophagus is not supposed to have, it's not able to protect itself from the acidic environment. So we have that burn associated with acid reflux. So we take Tums, which is a base. Tums neutralizes, or it takes the acid away, and we end up producing a neutral environment where we feel comfortable again. Buffers are not neutralizers. A buffer helps prevent pH changes. So if you have a buffer in an acidic environment, that buffer is going to maintain the acidic environment. It's not going to bring you back to neutral. It's going to maintain your acidic environment. Blood has a pH that is slightly alkaline or basic. So it's above 7.0, which is neutral. Anything below 7.4 is considered, or between that we have a range of 7.35 to 7.45. But anything below the 7.35 mark is considered acidic. Anything above the 7.45 is considered alkaline or basic. And so we have buffer systems that help maintain our blood pH at approximately 7.4. The main buffer system that I talk about here is the carbonic acid bicarbonate buffer system. If we have a very acidic environment, then we can take bicarbonate ions, can pull in hydrogen ions from the acidic environment, producing carbonic acid. And carbonic acid is a weaker acid. And that can help to maintain the blood pH. We'll talk a lot more about this in next semester when we're in the urinary system and the respiratory system, because those are our two main buffers of systems for maintaining blood pH. I'm going to stop here because my time's almost up, and we're going to get into the macromolecules of life in our next video.